ranking players for fantasy baseball drafts is not an easy job, but I'm going to do it anyways. Here's an early look at the top 50 overall players for fantasy drafts and the order that you should be taking them. We'll start by looking at the number 1 overall player, and it is Ronald Acuna Jr. Last year, there was some question. There was not a unanimous number 1 pick. I will say that if you look at my Who Should Be Number 1 video from last year, it was Acuna. That was the pick that I made. Some people were looking at guys like Trey Turner. Some had other opinions. But Acuna clearly proved to be superior to every other player on the planet. Now at number 2, this is up for discussion. A lot of good candidates, but I'm going to go with Mookie Betts. One look at his hitting profile from a year ago, you'll say, yeah, that makes sense. I mean, the one concern with Mookie was that his speed had kind of gone away, but if you look quietly over the last 2 seasons, his stolen base total slowly has bumped up. It's not what it used to be, but still, swiping 14 bags. And oh, by the way, one of the best with a 307 batting average. And the power is the best it has been in years, 39 home runs. But what's even better is now he's going to be the everyday second baseman. So instead of just being an outfield option for you, you can put him at the keystone and be happy. And then while these exciting young players with the power speed combo and all the steals might get more attention, I'm just setting his teammate Freddie Freeman there at number 3. So consistent, so good. And he does steal bases for you too, although you wouldn't tell it by his appearance. But most importantly, always one of the most overlooked parts of fantasy is the batting average. Doesn't get as much attention as those counting stats, but it's so important, especially these days, when you have a guy who is elite year after year. Also, his batting average, with the shift gone, one of the best he's ever had. There's really no need to question it. You know what you're getting for Freeman, and that is elite 5 category upside. Thankfully, in this format, we're looking at fantasy baseball, so postseason performance doesn't count. Sorry, Dodgers. I know that was kind of a low blow. At number 4, looking at Corbin Carroll, another guy I said I had no problem taking early last year. Some people were being a little risk averse with him. It's too early, too risky. No, this guy was a legit stud. Now, the thing with him is we saw after his injury in the shoulder was a little different. The power wasn't quite there. So you've got to wonder if he's going to be the same guy. He should be. He should be still an elite superstar player. The stolen base total will be among the best in the entire major leagues. Average power, check. Yeah, Carroll, I got no problem taking him this high. And Julio Rodriguez, very similar. Also, you got to wonder, is the power going to jump up for him this year? Even if it doesn't, it's okay. He's also going to be one of the stolen base leaders. And in terms of scoring runs and everything else you could ask for. The first pitcher on my list is, of course, Spencer Strider, the Braves. And I'm going to put him right there at number 7. The reason I have him just behind all those top 6 guys is you're looking at the 5 category studs: power, speed, average, check, everything that you could want. And of course, you could say that Kyle Tucker fits that bill, but still, I feel like this is where I draw the line. I want to have Strider if he's available. It's kind of insane if you consider the fact that over the last 2 years, he's averaging 37% strikeout rate, but also that he's been the best in that category the last 2 years. You get that ridiculous strikeout upside. He's on a great team. A little bit of a bump last year towards the end of the season, but he'll be fine. And then where do you put Juan Soto now that he's a Yankee? I'll safely slot him at the 10 spot. I mean, he's still a first-round value. Of course, doesn't get you the speed of the other players that are ahead of him. But can you really drop him any lower than this? We know, again, the batting average should rebound. Gotta wonder if it's just San Diego in that environment that's causing all these players to kind of disappoint. Don't know what it is, but still. Soto is made for Yankee Stadium. He's going to be in a good lineup that shouldn't underachieve. Now we look at picks 11 through 20. I'm going to highlight Ozzie Albies. I also feel somehow is being a little undervalued because when you look at what he brings to the plate, it's a 5-category stud. He does all the same types of things as guys like Betts and Bobby Witt, just a little bit less productive. The steals, probably 20-ish, feels fair. That might be his ceiling at this point. I'm surprised he didn't run more last year, to be honest, but he's going to help you with some steals. The average is not a question. The power is legit. and also going to be one of the league leaders in run scoring. So I would rather take a guy who can help me across every category at second base as opposed to some of these other players who are a little more power heavy that you see lower on this list. And let's talk another Brave, Matt Olson. Some people getting a little too aggressive with him. Let me explain. Yeah, I get the power is prodigious. When a guy hits 54 home runs and is also in the lineup that is arguably the best in the majors, I get it. You want to take him early. You don't want to wait because that's the type of production that can carry a team. But you have to be realistic. Again, let's look at what he did last year as opposed to his career arc. The year before, 34 home runs. The year before, 39 home runs. Had not gone over 40 in a season. And so will he repeat last year's power output? Highly unlikely. And, you can say that with Aaron Judge, the year that he went off. How can you pass up on this guy? Okay, injuries. Yeah, injuries happen to everybody. Aaron Judge is still a top 20 player, and some might say he's too low on this list. Power hitters are reliant on accumulating at-bats so they can accumulate home runs. I'm not worried about Olson's health. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying you're putting a lot of your eggs in that one basket because an injury can really set you back, but also the fact that guys just don't hit 50 to 60 home runs on a year-to-year basis. There's a good chance that just normal regression will hit and Matt Olson will go back to being a high 30s, maybe low 40s home run hitter. That's great. There's nothing wrong with that. But that's also not a player that you have to take in the first round. The guy that's going to be the toughest for me to value right now, I'm not really sure if this is too high or too low for Fernando Tatis Jr. Remember a couple years ago, he was the number one overall pick. Injuries, and last year, honestly, some underachievement, the entire Padres offense, but also him included. Let's face it, he didn't look exactly like the same guy. Will he be better this next year? He should be. Can he get back to being what looked like the best offensive player in the majors? Maybe. Is this Padres lineup from top to bottom going to be good enough to support him as an elite fantasy star? That's the question, because that top of that order is still loaded with stars with Tatis, Bogarts, Machado, but the bottom of the order, it's kind of ugly. Now when we get to picks 21 through 30, there's Austin Riley at the top. We've talked enough about the Braves, but I do want to talk about the fact that you see Riley and then you see Devers there. You're going to want to get a third baseman somewhat early in your draft. Every year, there's a certain position that just feels thinner than the rest, and this year it's easily third base. Depending on what position you slot for certain players, like for example Bobby Witt, qualifies at third base, could also qualify at shortstop. And then there's guys like Gunnar Henderson going to play a little bit of both positions. So with all that aside, let's just say once you get past the first, let's say 7, maybe 8 third basemen, there's a bunch of guys that just have risk. They're either veterans who you know that their upside is somewhat capped, or there's guys that are just kind of complete wild cards. I don't have to be the first to take a third baseman, and I'm not saying you have to force one into the first couple of rounds of your fantasy draft, but I don't want to be the last at that position most likely. I've seen that later on you can get some good value on guys like Josh Young in third base in the Texas Rangers lineup. I think he's a great value as of right now. Royce Lewis is going to be a very iffy one, but I also like him if you want to be aggressive. But again, there's just not a lot of sure things. So again, I don't mind taking a guy like Riley or Devers here, even if you feel like, well, we've seen the peak of their performance. I'm okay at taking what they will give me. I'm also okay taking Corbin Burnes here. I know last year was a little bit of a step back, but I feel like early in the season, still some nagging health issues. He wasn't quite right. Got it together, but again, the strikeout rate was still high. Even if the ERA did drop a little bit, I think he will get back to his usual dominant self. And so if I'm taking a pitcher here, I still do want an ace somewhere in the first couple of rounds. I like Burnes at this point, and I like Gausman just a little bit behind him. These guys aren't the young, exciting pitchers that we're going to see a little bit later on, but that's okay. Let's go on to group 31 through 40. And so we see Devin Williams, now the first closer up here. I have to confess, the last few years, I've just kind of been scared to take a closer this early because I don't want someone who's really going to contribute. I know, yeah, sure, some strikeouts and the ratios, but based on how many innings they pitched, you're really looking for help in this one category, and that is saves. I do think that it's okay to take an elite closer early because then you just lock down the position and then you can not worry about it till later, the middle, late rounds, and then speculate on some other guys. We know about half of all pitchers who start out as the closer on their team will not be the closer by season's end. And of course, there's always a risk of something like with Edwin Diaz, who just misses time and winds up being a burned pick. Diaz should be good to go. That's why I'm okay putting him as an elite closer back in the top 50 here. I got him below Williams. Williams has just been so good, and there's no question he's going to get all the opportunities there in Milwaukee. So I'm okay taking him here. 33 is where I have him because some of the players here afterwards aren't necessarily going to be 4 to 5 category studs as far as offense goes. And then the starting pitchers we're going to see a little bit later do have at least some degree of risk. Speaking of risk, are you willing to take Tyler Glasnow as your ace? I mostly am. I got him here. I'm probably taking a pitcher a little bit earlier here in most drafts, but you don't always get to choose who's available to you. Really, the only question with Glasnow is, can he stay healthy? I don't have the answer to that, obviously, but I'll say he's definitely in position to succeed here. Dodgers will probably be a little bit careful with him. That's the only thing I do kind of worry about. Also, is will they limit his innings at any point to keep him fresh for the postseason? But he's going to give you those elite ratios, elite strikeout ability, and if you're in a format where wins count, he should get plenty of those. And after last postseason, you might say, how come you don't have Adolis Garcia higher than this? Well, that's because I'm looking at the stats. His speed just isn't there anymore. He's actually become kind of a subpar runner, so the stolen bases won't be able to keep him on par with some of these other players that are going ahead of him. Which brings us to the last group here, 41 through 50, and that's a great segue to talk about Mike Trout. The speed hasn't been there for years. I mean, this guy barely gets even more than 1 or 2 a year. And so even if he does stay on the field, you're not getting that. That's it. Is he going to play half a season? Maybe 2/3 if you're lucky. No more Ohtani there to back him up. It's really disappointing to see what has become with that Angels team. So Mike Trout, he just can't carry that whole team on his back because, well, his back has a hard enough time holding up. And if you watch the video, as far as my buy or sell for early ADP, I did say it was too early for where Elly De La Cruz is going. How low can we put him? I don't think I can put him out of the top 50, though. This guy has way too much potential, too much upside, even barely more than half a season's worth of plate appearances last year. 35 steals, and you know the power is there. And earlier I talked about Royce Lewis being an option at third base. I will say 2 things. First of all, it seems aggressive putting him already in the top 50. This guy has all of 257 at-bats at the major league level. And you talk about a red flag for injury history. Yeah, look at Lewis. Missed so much time, especially in the minors before he even got called up. And then even last year, back and forth on the IL. But if you're willing to gamble in the early round at a position that isn't super deep, for a guy that could help you across the board. Remember, this was the former #1 overall draft pick by the Twins and an elite prospect throughout the minors who really is just health that has held him back. If this is the year he puts it all together, then you could have yourself a bargain. Let's just hope that this isn't another Byron Buxton. And then you might not see George Kirby as an ace for fantasy because he doesn't have those huge strikeout totals. But I'm going to call him an ace potentially for your fantasy staff because here's what he doesn't do. It's walk batters. He will give you elite whip. That doesn't sound as exciting as elite strikeout potential, but it's exciting when you have him on your team. A 1.04 whip last year. This guy was the best in terms of walk rate, 2.5%. That is Maddox-esque. While the strikeout rate is basically major league average, I'll tell you he's out there. He will eat up innings. He'll probably go over 200 this year. And so just by sheer volume, because he doesn't get himself into trouble, he'll approach, at least I'd say 180 in terms of total strikeouts. That means he'll be up there, maybe top 20 in terms of all starting pitchers because he's going to be consistent and reliable. And there's something to be said for that in fantasy. those are my early top 50 rankings for fantasy baseball drafts. You want to look at some of the players who I think are just going too high or too low based on early ADP. Well, you can check this video out right here.